Hi all, welcome to session 17 of Azure Data Factory, and in this session we are going to look into set variable activity. So set variable activity comes under control flow activities, and like the name suggests, in this case what you can do using set variable activity, you can give a value to a variable. Now, I will tell you the difference between variable and parameter in Azure Data Factory when we start doing the hands-on. But in order to understand the set variable activity in the data factory, let us first design a use case. So we are going to take the same files that we have taken in the last session, that is employee and our company's file. Now, what we are going to do, we are going to take a parameter from the user in our pipeline, and that parameter will tell the pipeline which file to pick. Okay, so before we pick that file, we will set the variable to show that file name, and then using that variable we are going to pick the file and copy it into our sync. Okay, so what we are trying to do is we are asking user to give us the value of the name, give us the file name for which you want to run the pipeline. Okay, so this is the simple use case that we are trying to develop. Now, why I'm going from these small or I would say less complex control flow activities, because these are very close to our programming languages. So like we have wait in our pythons, we initialize our variable in any programming language. Similar to that, we have set variable and wait activities in data factories. Okay, so you will be very comfortable by the time we go into more complex control flow activities. Okay, so just focus on it and understand it in a way like you are using a programming language. So when we start learning a programming language, we start with the very basic stuff, and then we gradually go towards more complex structures. So let's go to our data factory. Let me put Azure. Let me go to Azure portal. Fine. I am now going in my data factory. Okay. So let's go into author, and I will click on new pipeline. So I will name this pipeline as PL set variable demo. Okay. Now what I'm going to do in the activities, if you type set, you will get your set variable activity. Okay. So my use case is that I'm going to take the name of the file that I want to copy from user as a pipeline parameter. Then I will create a variable, set that parameter value as a variable initialization. So my file name will be represented in the variable, and after that, using that variable, I'm going to execute a copy activity. Okay, so I have set variable activity here. Let me pick the copy activity as well. Okay, so I am going to connect these two. Okay, in the set variable I will say set file name, and I would say copy file from source to sync. Now let's start our configuration. So in the set variable, if you see, you have settings. So you have pipeline variable. Let's just start with the pipeline variable. I will talk about pipeline return value in the next session. Okay. So I'm going with the simple example. So I'm going to use pipeline variable. Right now, if you see, I don't have any variable. Okay, so either you can click on this plus new to create a variable, or you can go to, you come out of this activity, click on variables and click on new. Okay, please remember that there is a limitation of what kind of variable you can create. So you can create string, boolean, array, integer. Please remember this. Okay, because if we go into parameter and if you click on the parameter, you have a lot many types. Okay, so you have string, int, float, bool, array, object, secure string. But in that case, in the case of variables, you have only string, boolean, array, and integer. Okay, so we want to create a parameter. So I will say PLP, short for pipeline parameter, file name. Okay, this is going to be a string, and in the variable I am going to say variable, short var, short for variable, and I'm going to say file name. Okay, now your parameter and variable is created. Click on your set variable, and if you click on the drop down, you will find the var file name in the drop down because you have already created it. Now if you click on add dynamic content, you can initialize this variable using the value from your pipeline parameter. Okay, so you can just click on this parameter name and it is going to initialize. So it will be like at the rate pipeline soft brackets dot parameters dot parameter name. Okay, you are done here. Now let's go to copy data activity. So in this activity, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use our data set that we created in our last session. So I'm not going to create anything new, I'm just going to reuse it. So here I'm going to say sync. Here I'm going to say, let me see, in my data lake, I think I have directories like companies and employees. Sync, yes, so companies and employees. Okay, so let me give a variable output as a folder name. Okay, and in the file, if you go and click on variable, I will tell you why we are not using parameters and we are using variables. Okay, I will tell you the difference, but right now just click on your variable name. Okay, so now everything is set up. Similarly, go to your sync, use this same. Okay, I think here it should be source because we are configuring source. Okay, so I would say input, and here I would say container sync variable output, and here again I'm going to say variable file name. Okay, now in order to avoid confusion, let me go back to my container. In source, I'm going to delete these two directories and I'm going to create a new directory with variable input as name. So you can go give the name in a directory pane. Variable input is there. Now let me upload the files that we are going to use. So I'm going to go in my desktop, Azure Data Factory course sessions, in session 17. Okay, I'm going to use the session 16 file. So I'm going to use file 1 and file 2, open, upload. Okay, now we have our source ready. Let me go back to containers, and in the sync, let me just remove these two directories. So these directories are now deleted. Okay, fine. So we are good with it. Fine. So let me publish it. Publishing complete. Validate. Everything looks good. Okay. Now let me trigger. So if you click on trigger now, it will ask you for file name. Okay. So if I go into my last session, and in session 16 I will see that okay, file1.txt is the name. Okay, so let me go and give name as file1.txt and click on OK. So pipeline has started executing. we have to wait for the execution to get completed. So if you see, you have set file name activity completed, which is a set variable activity type. So if you go and check, you have the variable name and you have the value as file1.txt. So this variable is holding this value. Okay, now if you see, output is again name and value. Okay, and this same name has been passed on to the copy activity. So if you go and see the parameter, let me see where the parameter is. Okay, so the file has been copied. Just a second. Okay, I think we cannot see here the parameters. Fine, but the data has been copied. So if I go into sync, and in sync if you check the variable output, you have the variable output and the file here. Okay, now again, if I want to run it one more time, and if I click on trigger now, and if I give the value as file2.txt, now the same pipeline will copy the second file. So let me go to pipeline again. If you see, input is file2.txt, the variable has been initialized with file2.txt. Now let's see what happens. Pipeline is successful. So if I refresh, you will see file2.txt. Okay, now the same thing can be achieved. Instead of giving the set variable and then using this variable in copy data, we can directly give the pipeline parameter also. So it's like this particular thing is actually not required. But why we use variables when we have the option to use parameter is that once your parameter is passed, you cannot change it entire in the entire pipeline. Okay, so it's like once you pass the parameter, its value is going to be constant for that pipeline execution. It cannot be changed. Whereas if based on certain conditions or based on some logic you want to change the value of your parameter, or you want to change the certain value in your pipeline, variable is the way to go. So when you are using variable in your pipeline, you can change the values of variable multiple times based on your requirements. But when you are using the parameter in your pipeline, the pipeline parameter will be constant for the pipeline execution. So whatever value you pass for that pipeline execution, that value is going to remain constant. Okay, so just for sake of your understanding, let me just do one thing. I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to say, okay, where file name, I'm going to hard code it. So let me just remove this. Okay, and I'm going to say it's file2.txt. Okay, similarly, what I'm going to do here, I'm going to again delete it. I'm going to say file1.txt. Okay, now let me just copy paste this as well. Okay, so what essentially I have done is I have removed the dependency from the parameter, and I'm just using variable. So I'm using the same variable name. If you see, it's where file name here also as well as here, but the values are different. Okay, since I no longer need the pipeline parameter, let me just delete it, and I'm going to publish it. Okay, for sake of simplicity, let me just delete these two pipelines, these two files, and let me just delete this directory as well. Okay, so it's publishing. Publishing is successful. Let me validate. Yes, everything looks good. Let me trigger it. Let me go to pipeline run. Okay, I think I have to wait for some time in order for this to show up. Yeah, now it is visible. Okay, so if you see, first of all, what is happening, it is using file1.txt as the value for the where file name variable. Okay, now let me refresh. Okay, if you see in the next part, so after copying the file 1, the same variable is now initialized with file2.txt, and then it is copying the file 2 into our sink. So if I go and refresh, you will see variable output and file 1 and file 2. So the set variable activity can be used in a way where you want a particular variable to hold certain values during the entire execution of the pipeline. So if you want to say that, okay, I want this variable to hold the different values based on my requirements in the pipeline for further execution, you can use the variables. But if you don't want anything to happen to that value in your entire pipeline execution, you can go with the parameter as well. So far we have seen two control flow activities. One is wait and the other one is set variable. Okay, now in that also we have only seen the first type, that is pipeline variable. In the next session we are going to see what is pipeline return value variable type is. Okay, so I hope you like this session. Please practice based on your consumption. It is going to charge you, so make sure that your data size is very less, and that will avoid you huge cost in your data factory. But if you keep on practicing, it will become second nature for you. So you will be find more and more you will be more and more comfortable while working with the data factory studio, and it will help you make pipelines in much better way. Okay, so let's meet in the next session. Thank you so much.